welcome to the ID84. It's not the ID84 show, but I did want to come on and I did want to talk a little bit about the Jimmy Kimmel firing that just happened the other day and kind of give my thoughts on the subject. Um, it's always sucks when someone loses their job, but people have to remember sometimes, although we do have the freedom of speech in this country, the freedom of speech does come with consequences. You're just not allowed to say whatever you want. Sometimes there are consequences that go along with that, whether it's people firing back at you verbally, whether in some situations it gets violent, and it could cost your life sometimes. But having that freedom is one of those great things that makes this country a great place to live. And not having that will make us like the rest of this world. Just go north into Canada. The freedom of speech doesn't exist. Just go to England. You can get arrested for tweeting something that someone doesn't like. But in the United States, you could say whatever you want. But as I said, it does come with consequences. ABC is a private company. They have the right to make decisions on who they want to work there and what they want to have to represent their company, as any company does, as any school or any other business does. They have the allowed to get rid of a employee if that employee therefore makes their business look bad or could cause people not to go and cause an embarrassment to such a thing to happen. But you do have the right to say whatever you want. In fact, you could go on a media like this. You could go on Twitter, you could go on Zoom or anything of that nature, and you could just with TikTok. Yes, I'm trying to think. I'm sorry, I'm getting up there in age. I don't remember. You could go in there and you could say whatever you want to say, and you have the right to do that. You have to face the consequences to what you say. So people might come at you angrily for something that you said that you may not agree with them, but the way you should approach it is you should be aware this is going to happen when you do that, and then try to de-escalate the situation as best as possible. So Jimmy Kimmel, I believe, was, as most people say, he wasn't going to be renewed. I don't believe ABC was going to renew his contract. From what we heard, he was not coming back after his contract was up. Um, Late night TV as a whole is not something that people watch anymore. In fact, it's mostly for the boomers, to be quite honest with you. It's the 55 plus community that really enjoys still watching, those late night shows. And for act terrestrial radio and terrestrial TV is a thing of the past for my generation and the generations after mine. Us millenniums were the first ones to basically have the internet, in our hands anytime we wanted. Most of us got the internet when we were in elementary school and were first exposed to it. So for us, this is a medium that we've kind of grew up with, and we kind of, you know, uh, adapted to as times changed. Now, the generations below us, it's all they knew. They don't know antenna TV and antenna radio because everything's on demand and attention spans for them are very short. So, as a medium, as a program, I do believe that the Jimmy Kimmel show was going to go away anyways, just like the Colbert show is going away. The only thing keeping Fallon alive is the legacy of the Carson show, in which he had taken over with, out from Jay Leno and so on and so forth. So that will have a little bit of, grit to hold on to a bit, but how long, it doesn't know. Once a show starts losing money and it starts costing too much money, as any business, you don't want to hemorrhage money. So you want to be able to run a business and be successful and be profitable. And I don't think these late night shows are being very profitable. So as the thing that Jimmy Kimmel said, like I said, he had the right to say whatever he wants. It's the freedom to say what he wants, but they do have consequences. So what he said did have a consequence. And it's unfortunate because Jimmy Kimmel is a comedian. Over the last few years, he hasn't been very funny as a comedian. He has become very obsessed with Donald Trump and everything that goes with it. And it's very upsetting. The Trump derangement that he has obsessed his life. And he was an edgy comic back in the day on the Man Show and stuff like that. When he was on a radio show in Seattle, he was so edgy that they lost their sponsorship or a partnership with the Seattle Mariners when he first started off. So the guy was an edgy guy. But the problem is he just got so obsessed with one particular subject, it consumed his life, and he forgot how to be funny. And it's sad because as someone who does comedy, you realize that you have to make sure you're able to keep the crowd entertained. Now, I understand what it feels like to be in a situation where you're putting on a show or something and people come at you and they try to get you fight. The early days of the Adi and Eric show, when we first started many, many years ago in the winter of 2009, we were on a online radio station, and we were just young, edgy guys trying to be entertaining. We were starting off in the comedian business, and we were doing stand up, and I had been doing this online radio for a while since college, and we kind of graduated to a bigger station, and we try to keep edgy. Now we were inspired by people like Howard Stern and Opie and Anthony, Toucher and Rich and stuff. These were guys that we listened to all the time, and we liked the edginess of the radio, and it was very entertaining to us, and we did like to make people laugh. When we were on our first station, they had told us several times that we weren't allowed to talk about certain subjects, we weren't allowed to use certain language, and we weren't allowed to basically do anything that they didn't like. Now, as a private company, they had absolutely the right to tell us to do that. And if we wanted to continue to be on that station, we had to adjust. Now, we adjusted a bit, but we just couldn't take it. And we found out it was better that we went on our own. So we broke off from that company because we just didn't see eye to eye on certain situations, which is completely fine. We did our own thing for a little while, and then we moved on to another online station. We were on this other online station for a while, and we had come up with this idea for a concept that wasn't a bad idea, but it was a contest in order to try to get people to listen to the show and be entertained. At the time, Barstool Sports was taking off. They were doing these crazy parties and these crazy contests, and they had these things online, where they would get very attractive girls to come on. And we were trying to do that with our show to try to inspire, because we figure if you have beautiful girls come on your radio show, you have guys listening, which will increase your business like anything else. Sex sells, and that's what we were trying to do. Now, we had a contest where we were having girls come in, and we were like a Halloween contest, like we had the sexiest Halloween costume, all that stuff. And, we were able to basically get a bunch of people to become contestants, and we would have a contest, and people would come on, they would come on the show, tell them a little bit about themselves, and then, us as a radio show would vote on them. It was nothing that was against the law. It was nothing that was racy. It was just, girls like to get dressed up for Halloween, and we just decided it was around Halloween we were going to have a contest like that. Now, we had some people that were past guests on the show, I could say, who were comedians, I guess you could say, that didn't like it. So instead of just not listening, now, granted, the radio station didn't care that we were doing this. In fact, we ran this stuff by the station. They were 100% fine with whatever we were doing. It was these people that didn't necessarily listen, but didn't like us when we posted something on the internet advertising the show and whatever we're doing. Now, they had the right to be angry with it. That's fine. And they could have commented on it and said they didn't like it. And I would have said, well, you don't have to listen. And they don't have to listen, which is great. But they instead try to turn around and go up to the upper people of the radio station and try to get us taken off. Now, as I said, we weren't doing anything that was inappropriate. We weren't doing anything that was vile and embarrassing to the station we were on. These people just didn't like the show, which is 100% fine. And I'm happy that the management at the station would agree with us and stuck with us and just pretty much told them, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Now, the difference between what I was doing on that show and kind of what Jimmy Kimmel was doing is that he's on a terrestrial radio station. Now, back in the 1930s, if you don't know what terrestrial radio, once radio and TV started being broadcast, the United States government stepped in so they can monitor it. There's a little thing called the FCC, and you probably heard of it. Howard Stern got in trouble with the FCC several times over his career. A lot of radio stations get in trouble with them, and a lot of TV stations sometimes get into them. And the reason there has to be a commission to monitor this, because anyone could access this medium. If you had a radio or a TV with an antenna, you were able to access this. Now, this all changed a little bit when cable and satellite radio came into play, because with that, there was a subscription package, so you knew what you were getting to. So they allow a little bit more on there. They do still abide somewhat by FCC regulations just to try to keep sponsorships, but that's basically the only reason why. They don't have to. They can do whatever you want. An example is HBO and Cinemax or Comedy Central. After a certain time, they allow swearing and stuff like that. And the reason they do that is because sponsorships at those hours or in those particular stations don't count. Like, for example, HBO and Cinemax, it's a premium station, so it actually costs more to watch it. So they're making their money on the subscriptions, and they don't worry about advertisements. But with the problem with terrestrial, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, I think those are the major ones. They have broadcasts over the airwaves. So because they're going over airwaves, the government steps in and the government has an obligation to monitor them. Whether I agree with the FCC monitoring media is debatable because it does go against the First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. In theory, you should be able to say what you want. In fact, if you go over to Europe, you could watch TV programming and you have vulgar language and stuff in the middle of the day. In some countries, there could be pornography right on an airwave and you don't even know about it. I've seen it when I was over in Italy. It was crazy. After a certain time, it became to like softcore pornography and it was crazy. Right on your regular TV that any kid could just turn on and watch. But their ways of thinking are a lot different over there. You know, some are good, some are bad. But in this country, you couldn't do something like that. And that's the way the standard's been for almost 100 years now since this media has been around. So him being on these government airwaves basically means the government has to monitor it. Now, people with the misconception is that Donald Trump fired him. No, Donald Trump doesn't own these television stations. These television stations, for example, ABC is owned by Disney. Disney owns them. Disney made the decision to get rid of Kimmel. Now, the reason they did that was because when you have a broadcasting station such as ABC, that is the mother station, for example. So to break it down a little bit, you have the main station. So you have ABC, and then you have all these branches that come off of ABC. Those are your affiliates. So, for example, ABC's main headquarters, I would say NBC. I know that one's in New York, right? So New York said that's their headquarters. So that's their primary station, right? So that's where they broadcast, that's where they produce. Now they send out that media to their affiliates into individual cities. So, for example, Boston, for example, ABC's picked up by Channel 5. Channel 5 is owned by a larger company. These companies that own these basically affiliates own several companies. So what happened was the ABC affiliate that owned like 60% of all the ABC affiliates in this country, I think it was two companies, decided they weren't going to put Kimmel on the TV because they didn't like what they said. Now, these individual companies that these affiliates are independent companies and they have the right to do whatever they want. So if they feel like they don't approve or don't like what he's saying, they have the right to just not air it. Even though they have a partnership with ABC, they don't have to play everything ABC does. They could say, no, I'm not going to play it. Now, what happens with this? In turn, ABC will lose revenue, they'll lose viewers, and it'd just be hurtful for the program that's on. Ideally, you want whatever ABC's throwing at you, all the affiliates to pick up and watch. That is the primary thing to do. So when 60% decide they're not going to air, a major program that's on every day, there's a problem right there. So Disney had to make a decision and did what they did. Now, frankly, I think he was going to be gone anyways in a few months. I think this was just trying to cut the excess fat in the station a little bit earlier. Do I agree with them firing? Well, yes, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want, even if it was a conservative or no matter what your political affiliation is, and they did this. The company does have the right. As a comedian, as someone who believes in free speech, as someone who believes in the First Amendment, it sucks a little bit. But Kimmel is free to go and do whatever he wants. If he wants to start his own media company, he can. If he wants to go online and just broadcast like we do here, he can. And there's no one that can tell him not to. He just said, remember, there's consequences for what you said. But like I said, it's a sad situation that a guy who was once talented, once entertaining, and people did enjoy his content, and it was a little raunchy. It was probably more for guys, but he kind of switched gears a little bit as his career went on. Whether that was something that ABC tried to steer him in that direction or not, I don't know. We're not in those rooms to know this stuff. But it did seem that unfortunately his, Trump derangement syndrome did take the best of him. And it's upsetting because you shouldn't let a politician or anyone get in your head like that. And I see this with people every day that I know, and it's obsessed with them, and it's no reason why. And I said the best example is, for the most part, is your life changing any different when there's a president in power than when there's another president? For the most part, for like 90% of it, it isn't. You go on with your day. Now, you get more affected by smaller government, right? Your town government affects you a lot more because it's more intimate and affects you directly on a daily basis. Your state government, to another extent, but not as much, but still a little bit more than the federal government does, right? Now, they do laws and they may do stuff that may restrict things that you were able to do before you can't do. That could be catastrophic to your business or just your lifestyle in general, but you deal with that road when it comes. But for the most part, most of us are living in the same way we were living, when Biden was president. So to really let one particular person ruin your life, it just it's terrible because life is so short. And life is so fragile and it could be gone at any minute. You have to enjoy the days you're on earth. When you're angry and you get mad at people, strangers you don't know, it's sad because you're wasting energy on something negative when you could be using that energy on something positive. You could be using that energy to change something, to talk to someone, to learn why they think a certain thing is the way they are. You may see something this way, they might see it that way. Well, why do I see it this way, but they see it that way? You'll never know unless you ask them. So why don't you ask them? So instead of going online and being angry at someone and just yelling at strangers, maybe if you're really that interested or you're concerned by something they say, why don't you ask, why do you think this way? I guarantee you're going to screw with them and they're not going to know what to do because they're probably not used to someone doing it. And they might think you're sarcastic or being an ass, but in general, you're just curious. Why do you think this way? I'm curious. Why do you think this way? And they will probably tell you. And if they want to engage in intelligent conversation, this is a great gateway to learn about things that you didn't ordinarily know and learn about someone who didn't know before and why they think that way. Maybe there was something that happened in their life that causes them to think the way they did. You would never have known that. And you have to respect if that's something that happened to them that was that catastrophic in their life to change the way they think, then it's very concerning. You might want to learn about that. I would want to learn about that. And you'd feel a little more empathy for someone who has an emotional problem that something was caused by something else. But I welcome you all there just to think of this right now. Just basically, as a human being, just think about your fellow human beings. Don't be mean to them, especially to strangers. Try to embrace the people who think differently of you and learn why they think differently than you. You don't have to agree. They have the right to say what they want to say, and you have the right to say what you want to say. Just don't be hurtful and don't be embarrassing to yourself. Because you got to remember, you're carrying yourself as a poster of who you represent. And who you represent goes on to your parents, goes on to your kids, and any family members or friends, companies you may work for that could get mad for something you say, and everything else under the sun. So, like I said, enjoy the freedom of speech, but understand there are consequences for things you might say. And don't do the hate speech. Don't be angry at someone. Don't go after someone you don't know. Take that anger, bottle it up, and relax. There's worse things in this world that could be happening. The situation you're in right now, after reading whatever you read, is a thin layer of what could be dealing with if you were somewhere else on this planet. So just think about that. Just be happy you're alive every morning when you wake up. You can breathe air. You take a deep breath. Just relax. When you're in traffic in the morning and people are driving like idiots, just take a deep breath and relax. Because what are you going to get all upset about? You could get upset, lose your temper, have something crazy happen to you on the road, and your life could go up like that. There are crazy people out there. You have to navigate these people. It's great to help these people if they can be helped, and you should help them if you can help them. But just be aware that people may not be as level-headed as you. So try to stay level-headed. Try not to be so consumed about things in life that really you have no control of. Try not to be angry at people you don't know. And understand that be very, very happy you live in a country that has the ability to have different states and stuff of that nature. So if you don't like something that's going on in the state you're in, you always have an opportunity to go to another state. But that's all I wanted to say about that. I didn't want to do a full show, but I just wanted to do a quick little snippet. But thank you guys for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Check out our show. We try to air every Monday and Friday. And we welcome you to be a guest anytime you want to discuss anything you like. So thank you. It's ID84 from the 84 Show.